buyer love letters. That's the topic for today. And it's a very important one. It's very timely right now, especially in a hot market. So what is a buyer love letter? A buyer love letter is essentially something that a buyer wants to write to a seller to appeal to the emotions of the seller, to try to gain some sort of advantage as to why the seller should accept their offer and not somebody else's. But what's important is this isn't like trying to get, the price or the inspection contingencies or any of that type of thing. These letters are trying to deal with more personal issues. For example, let's say Bob and Susie write an offer on a house. And after they write their offer, they submit a love letter. Their love letter reads something like, Susie and I sure loved looking at your house today. My wife and I, we have 3 kids. They're beautiful. We can just imagine ourselves pouring our hearts into trying to improve this house. And we can imagine our kids waking up on Christmas morning and playing in the backyard and doing all these things. And I'm sure your family over the years did the same thing, and we'd like to do those same things too. And the hope is when you submit a letter like this that you're going to get the seller to fall in love with you. You want them to accept your offer. Here's the problem. What we just talked about in that letter, right? We know that Bob and Susie, a heterosexual couple that are married, just wrote a letter talking about the holiday of Christmas, talked about their kids playing in the backyard. I mean, we've implicated right then and there sex, which is a protected class under fair housing laws. We've implicated sexual orientation, which is a protected class under fair housing laws. We've invoked familial status, religion. All these things have come up. So what happens if Bob and Susie write an offer that's identical? Or let's say not even identical. Let's say Bob and Susie write an offer on a house, and there's one for another $150 from Bob and Bill, and they take Bob and Susie's offer. There is going to be a strong argument that could be made that by taking that offer, you have made a decision based on a protected characteristic in violation of fair housing laws. And we know that both sellers can be liable for fair housing violations, and realtors can also be found in violation of fair housing laws as well. So what do you do? How do you make sure that this never happens? If you're a buyer's agent, you advise on the front end of the transaction that you're not going to submit any love letters. You're only going to make an offer based on criteria such as the price, such as inspection provisions, such as all those things that are normally part of a real estate contract. You're not going to try to get the house based on a protected characteristic because that could be a fair housing violation. On the other side, if you're a listing agent, you're going to tell your seller on the front side that you're not going to that they shouldn't accept any love letters, that there are fair housing violations that could arise if they accept those. So what happens if your buyer is demanding a love letter? You definitely do not participate in it. You don't deliver it. What happens if a seller is demanding that they want you to accept love letters? You just explain the issues with them, the liabilities associated, that you're not going to read them, that you're not going to deliver them, that you're not going to touch them. Again, how do you make sure that this doesn't become an issue? You advise on these types of things at the front side of the transaction. And when you think about these love letters, by the time you take away all these protected classes, right? Race, sex, sexual orientation, religion, familial status, by the time you take away all these things, it's pretty hard to write anything of any value that doesn't implicate one of these protected classes. And while somebody might honestly think that they're not doing anything wrong by submitting such a letter, or might feel that they have no intent to do something that's violating the law, that might not matter at the end of the day, because what they need to understand is that what they're really trying to do in that situation is get a house for a reason that's not allowable, that's illegal. So again, please be aware of these buyer love letter issues. Again, look at the National Association of Realtors position on their website on these love letters as well, and understand just the issues that can arise with these letters next time you hear about them.